Welcome to the Artisan Network session. I'm joined today by Bill McNeil, Nigel Kearns, Duane Nardocchio, and myself, Madison Greening. I think we're going to begin the session just by going down the line and speaking to all of our qualifications and experience, introduce ourselves, tell you all why we're here today. And yeah, I guess we'll start with you, Bill, although that's a little self-evident.
Okay. I'm Bill McNeil, General Manager of the Coast, 89.7 Community Radio here in Cape Breton, the host station for the conference. I probably met just about everybody, and we had quite a busy evening last night with the tours going through the station. So we thank you for all those who showed up for our event. I have been working, I worked in radio from, I'm going to say how old I am, 1979. Through 1993. And then I was crazy enough to leave radio in 93 to get into the music industry, which I enjoyed greatly, and got to produce some albums and recordings for artists. And over that course of time, I was very frustrated with the lack of local airplay on radio stations in the market. So I decided we should have our own radio station to play our own regional artists. And so we started to develop the Coast in 2003, and went on the air in 2007 full-time, and I am, in addition to being general manager, also music director, which is something I started out in 79 with, and really loved that part of the business.
I'm Nigel Kearns, basically a music industry professional. I'm with Cape Breton Music Industry Cooperative, our island's music association, and appointed board member for the East Coast Music Association, representing Cape Breton. I've been involved in music and events for far too long. I started out as a young teen as a radio fan. And as I realized recently, that trend continued throughout my life to this minute.
I'm Madison Sunny Greening. I go by Sunny in the local music industry. I am an emerging artist myself. So, musical director over there. Hi, nice to meet you. And I am an executive board member of CB Mike. I also run an emerging artist incubation program through my business, Sunny Days Events and Entertainment. And I focus on community and economic development opportunities that cultivate place DNA and really highlight the heritage and culture of Cape Breton as a part of a tourism and music strategy, and to further our export market. And how about yourself, Duane?
My name is Duane Nardocchio. I am the executive director of the Cape Breton Music Industry Cooperative, and also a longtime music professional in various assets and expectations of the music industry. Did some freelance work in sound and in tech areas. Toured as a stage tech for a number of years, and a stage manager. Have been involved with artist promotion with a company called Boone's New Music Network back in the 90s. I've run a listening room for a number of years called the Island Arts Cafe. And then it's brought me now to working with the Cape Breton Music Industry Cooperative for the last 7 years, which in my role helps me to network and guide artists in their stages of careers as they develop from beginning to emerging professional and export developed artists. So it's very exciting. And of course, I'm happy to be here to speak on this because it's an important piece. Radio holds a very important piece still to this day, and I'm of the generation that relied on radio so I could record my favorite songs on cassette tape so I could listen to them long before there was streaming and downloading and all that stuff. So anyway, happy to be here. Thanks for coming, guys.
So we're going to have a bit of a roundtable conversation today. I think across the years of experience here and the overlapping areas and domains, areas of interest and domains here, there's a lot to be said about the symbiotic nature of community and campus radio and emerging artists and the value of networking across those platforms. So I want to, I guess, first of all, look at the legacy piece here, because I'm surrounded by people who have seen the evolution of radio over the years. And while I grew up in a more digital age, and we now are kind of seeing the shift of the industry to those online platforms, I also was very much a radio listener growing up, although that experience is quite a bit different and probably a heck of a lot more corporatized than yours, Nigel. So why don't you guys tell me a little bit about your origin story? Because I know you've worked together in the past, and I know that you worked to develop a platform, Radio Free Cape Breton, about 25 years ago now, maybe more.
Yeah, the other day, 25 years ago. Yeah, it could be around then. You want me to talk on that?
Yeah, I'd love
Yeah.
to hear your experience. And then,
Well, before that, after I got out of the Navy, I was venturing into building a pirate radio station. I got some really bizarre equipment from the military and was going to go into the woods and do some nasty pirate radio. That didn't pan out for me. So jumping ahead, in the mid-90s, the East Coast Music Awards was now starting to rotate around Atlantic Canada, as opposed to previous years where it was in one location. A couple years prior to that, a group of us got together. You were with us too, Bill. And we were going to do Radio Free Cape Breton, which I believe was our society working title at the time. And we were pursuing that. And then in 2000, the ECMAs were returning to Sydney, and we chose to use Radio Free ECMA as an opportunity to beta test our concept for creating our own radio station. Now, Bill has got experience. I had zero, except a failed pirate radio station. And so we pushed the envelope. We did the call-ins. Before Radio Free ECMA was simply cassettes and maybe CDs. I can't quite remember. Anyway, we introduced the guests, call-ins, and everything that radio has become. And that was great. Oddly, I mean, our mission with the Cape Breton community radio station petered out. We had raised, $7,000 in the bank, and it just disappeared. The energy had lost, except for this gentleman who grabbed onto it, and our society got together and we dissolved and gifted him the funds, and he created the Coast.
Yeah, the Coast, actually, the Coast began as I remember these days well. Some I don't want to remember but we began as a special event radio station, sort of a legacy project, I guess, of that original ECMA concept and Radio Free Cape Breton. We never lost vision of what we wanted to do with Radio Free Cape Breton, which was to make sure that local artists are front and center on the radio. But we began we developed the cooperative, and then we began to do low power special event radio broadcasts. And those broadcasts were done at a 28-day cycle. We had to file a license. I guess I should say I had to file a license to make sure it was legal. Every 28 days with Industry Canada, and we would move the radio station all around the CBRM, doing special event broadcasts tied to whatever event was, be it a festival or whatever, and introduce people, try to educate them on what we were trying to get to, which is now today, the Coast 89.7. So that's where that began. Dedicated group of people right from the get-go. As Nigel mentioned, the original group with Radio Free Cape Breton, they were all busy. They all had other things to do, and I happened to be the lone, I guess, radio ranger, for lack of a better term. And so we just, but they supported it and we ran with it. It was a lot of fun. We would set up broadcasts, sometimes climbing through the roof of the City Hall getting up on the roof in February with the wind whipping off Sydney Harbor to put up a mast with an antenna so people could hear us for 28 days. And then, of course, in December of 2007, we were granted a license for a full-time radio station, 6,000 watts ERP, which is quite significant for community radio. And we've been going ever since and growing ever since, and still with that initial goal of making sure that local and emerging artists are always front and center on our radio station.
Now, backing that mandate, what's the motivation for you to ensure that you're sourcing local and emerging artists? How do you see that serving your radio station?
Yeah, we try to keep a dialogue. Obviously, you know, certainly with CB Mike, we've always had an open dialogue there. As the station grew, we've had more and more emerging artists coming forward, but we try to keep an eye on who's playing where, how do we get their music. One of the things sometimes that happens is in this day with digital platforms is that artists get so excited about Spotify playing their music, they forget about the local radio station. The difference with that is, and this is, you know, I'm not going to get into the whole Spotify thing because if you get played on radio in Canada and SOCAN fees are paid and you're registered with SOCAN, you're going to make more money there than you're going to make off Spotify. Well, yeah, with one song. So we actively seek out the local artists. Sometimes they, as I say, they forget and they kind of, hey, I'm on Spotify. Well, what about the local radio station? Because when the local radio station is playing you, they're the ones that are also saying, by the way, you can catch that artist playing at the Savoy Theater or the Highland Arts Theater, wherever, whereas Spotify is not doing that. They're just simply playing a piece of music.
And you've cultivated a certain amount of trust within your audience to know that the filter that you're applying is unbiased and you're bringing in quality, high caliber music onto the station. So where an artist or emerging artist might be lost in the highly saturated digital media world, where you have an overabundance of playlists and songs and platforms, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, etc. If you're already curating your content to your local audience, then there is implicit trust there that that artist is pre-vetted, right? So there's inherent value for the artist, and from that perspective as well, to create that relationship with their local stations.
Oh, certainly. The other thing too, and I've always done this since I was music director in the early days, I was taught to do this, be honest with an artist. So take the time to listen to the artist's music. If there's something production-wise that you think is actually detrimental to promoting the artist at a particular time, maybe the mix was really bad, and especially if you're playing it between two established artists, it may even stick out worse, then be honest with the artist. Take the time to talk to them and say, you know, if the bass and drums were a little tighter on that, if the vocal was a little cleaner, we can even up the spins on that. It's not just a matter of featuring it in some way, but actually getting it there. Great example of what we do is we don't take a certain hour somewhere and just stick a bunch of local music there. Our music is integrated next to every superstar. You're going to hear a Cape Breton artist in between a Rod Stewart song and an Elton John song or whatever. And I got a great story about J.P. Cormier when we first started at the coast. He was coming in to do, it might have been ECMAs, I can't remember, but he was coming into town and he dropped by the station and he said, I finally made it. And I said, well, what do you mean? You're JP, you're great. And he said, yeah, but I was played right after Gordon Lightfoot on your radio station. So that's the kind of thing that really sets us apart. And that is, and again, digital platforms, you've got to use every mechanism you can as an artist. I understand that. But don't forget your local radio station, your community radio station, because we can give you the feedback that you're not necessarily going to get. And that feedback, we never do it to harm an artist in any way. We want to do it to make sure that that artist can take something from that and come back an even better artist. And I've done that. I've had very successful artists come to me, stop me at a national convention and say, Remember when you wouldn't play my first single on commercial? And that was when I was in commercial radio, because you said that the production wasn't there or whatever. And my vocal wasn't that good. I was a little out of tune. I worked on that. And now that I have a major record label, it's people like you that help me get there, help me improve. So it's really important. Radio can be a real, a good sounding board for an artist if the music directors take the time to do it. And I will say that, especially in our sector, I think music directors would take the time to do that.
Now, Duane, in your relationships with the local community radio stations, when you're vetting or working within our network through CB Mike, what are you looking for and how are you speaking to the artists about self-promotion and business development?
Okay. Well, first I'll start because people keep bringing up CB Mike and the Cape Breton Music Industry Cooperative. So I'll take a second just to kind of tell everybody what that is actually. So Cape Breton Music Industry Cooperative, or CB Mike in its acronym, is a small music association here in Cape Breton, and not unlike the other 4 music associations in Atlantic Canada. We do similar things, and all the other music associations are provincial representatives, but here in Nova Scotia, we have 2, just because of the sort of additional amount of artists that come from this area. The island, while not heavily populated, has a pretty robust music scene, and so many years ago, it was decided that we needed a second body to support the amount of people that were trying to make it in the music industry. So that's basically what CB Mike is. It's a representing body for emerging to developed artists to help them provide to help us to provide them with information, mentorship, educational opportunities, funding for various things like recording new albums, showcasing opportunities, export growth opportunities, and so on. And so in that capacity, I get connected with a lot of the artists from the island that are looking to develop in many different ways. And of course, getting new music out there is a challenge for everybody. And it's still the most important piece of the music industry, no matter how you look at it. And so you record an album or record a single, and then what do you do with that particular single? And right now in the music industry, if anybody out there is a musician and is trying to do stuff, you'll probably agree that it's a pretty difficult landscape to navigate right now. The industry is trying very difficult to find itself, I believe. With the onset of technology and various avenues that way that music gets involved in, suddenly it becomes a very vast universe for musical promotion and a little tough to do everything. And, I've recently been listening to some information on the industry, and, basically the most influential people in the music industry right now have very little or anything to do with music. They are basically into technology. And those are the people that are building, the platforms for streaming and promotion in those regards, which, as we all know, are not the most fruitful for the musicians creating the music. So to me, radio is still a very integral piece for the industry and your artist development. And I will remain to advocate for that as long as the industry allows it. So, having a relationship with the community radio station who is very supportive, whether it's here or whether it's anywhere in the country, is still a very important piece for artists because, as Bill pointed out, you can still get a personal connection with your community or even your campus radio stations that you can't get with corporate or commercial radio. And you need that in your early stages of development for sure, for many reasons. First of all, every artist needs to start building a following. And, whether if you've had no success in music yet and you haven't, had your music out, uh, grassroots is a great way to start. You need to build a fan base, and you need to start playing shows and doing all those things and creating a mailing list of real fans. And the reason I say that is because, in a world of streaming and social media, where part of the industry is heavily pushing on your ability to have so many followers, so many likes, so many streams, so many downloads, all those things. But those are, again, they're numbers, they're digital fans. And if any of those platforms fail, you lose all those people. So you need real fans in any degree to maintain any sort of development piece in your music. Yes, so by the grace of God, someone can get lucky and end up with a viral single on one of the platforms and get all kinds of attention. But I think we've all seen some of that happen. And there's only a very, very tiny percentage of people who are able to leverage that for any distance beyond its momentary 15 minutes of fame. And then most stuff falls off and disappears into the sea of a billion other viral videos or singles or whatever it happens to be. But having a true anchored source locally to build your fan base and to communicate with and get airplay where you may not get airplay anywhere else. And definitely the struggles of approaching commercial radio is a lot different than approaching a community radio station, for example, whereas you can very likely get a chance to talk to a person at the station. As Bill said, maybe get an invite to come and discuss your music or come or send in a music and have it, listened to. Whereas, when you're trying to connect with commercial radio, you're again in a sea of applicants trying to do that. Some people don't get to listen to your stuff. It may end up getting looked at, but it may end up on a playlist. It may not. So there's a lot of variables there, but the long point here is that I still think strongly that anybody looking to start a career or advance their career in music needs to start at that ground level. And there's been a lot of artists that have done that, that have utilized that to expedite their career. I think of artists like, well, you talk about small communities. We're in a small community here in Cape Breton, but Feist, for example, from Amherst, Nova Scotia, leveraged community and campus radio in her early stages of her career. I think it was her first album, Let It Die. She had extreme success with community and campus radio, which helped leverage her ability to get on, top 30 playlists and top 100 playlists, and to get access to the commercial radio to drive her success. Arcade Fire from Montreal is another great example of that. Big community and campus radio users in the early stages. And there's others, Tegan and Sarah, for example, City and Color. So you can't underestimate the power of that and what it can actually do for you. And, of course, you can build followers that way. And again, you can, if you're at campus radio, you have a chance to connect with, the younger student body across the country. And those radio stations connect and can speak to each other too. So, you've suddenly, you establish a relationship with one or two, then you may be able to leverage that into a network of stations, which to me is far more valuable than reaching out to, say, one or two commercial radio stations who really don't care about what you're doing. But if you have success on the other end, they'll care and they'll want to play you.
Thank you. Yeah, to expand on that, I think the power of word of mouth has really been negated in the last couple of years with the development of these new digital platforms. And I kind of find, besides the fractional payouts that most of them offer. I do find that it's a bit akin of shouting into the abyss. And while it is necessary as an emerging artist to develop those platforms to meet criteria, whether it's for funding or whether it's for showcasing, participating in events like the ECMAs itself, if you want to be, getting your name out there, it is a critical part of the business development aspect. But ultimately, when you're working with campus and community radio, it's not just the plays that you're getting on air when you make that connection. It's the students and the volunteers and all the participants who are in studio who will bring your name and your work back to their friend groups. So, and that's when Spotify might become a little bit more of a valuable outlet, because then you do have an online presence that they can access outside of, tuning in. So yeah, the power of word of mouth when you're an emerging artist and generating that buzz. And it is a bit overwhelming because at this phase of development, the expectation of all of these, all of these criterion is put entirely upon you. And the barrier to entry, the barrier to development, production development is massive. Making an album, marketing, spin tracking, if you're trying to outsource pieces of the promotional work that you need to do to launch an EP or a new album, you're looking at $30,000, $35,000 just to get that produced, mixed, mastered off the ground. It can be incredibly time consuming. And I mean, as a barrier to entry, the limiting factor is generally financial. So if you have a good song in your back pocket and you can produce one good song and make a connection with a radio station here, and you can leverage that into payouts from SOCAN and slowly build your financial portfolio to back your own development, work with business incubators or member networks like CB Mike, people like myself who focus on business development and grant writing, and you're going to need a portfolio of some kind, one or two songs to demonstrate your capacities and your potential. But ultimately, you don't have to bite off the whole financial burden all at once. So creating these networks and taking this one step at a time can often be honestly one of the most feasible ways to build not only a sustainable music career over time, like your examples, and a solid audience following, but also access it without bankrupting yourself. And that's a big limiting factor for the young emerging artists that we work with. Now, Nigel, take me back to the days of duffel bags and cassette tapes thrown onto, what was it, RRR3's desk in Australia there. Take me back to what it meant to connect with a campus or community radio.
Yeah, so a couple days ago, maybe 2 decades, I think it was, it doesn't matter, it's irrelevant. I ended up going to be in Australia for a month, and I was just finishing. I was the technical director for Celtic Colors, and like 3 or 4 days after that, I beeline to Australia. In planning that trip, I wasn't sure what I was going to really do. I was going there more for a family thing, but being a month, I had to come up with something else. So I went to all our artist management friends and colleagues, and I gathered press kits. And in that day, press kits were very cumbersome hard copy pieces, fancy folder, print material, and a big ass CD every package. So I think I had 11 or 12 artists I had, and probably a dozen packages of each artist. So I literally flew with a Labatt's blue hockey bag full of promo packs, and off I go. So I'm dropping around in key locations, and I come across RRR3 in Melbourne, and it was probably the largest community radio station. I mean, it's a city of millions, and it was a fascinating radio. But I didn't get to meet the host of the segment, which the material I had, his genre and area. So I dumped it on his desk, left a note, and off I went. A couple days later, I get this phone call from this frantic DJ called Ricky Vengeance, thinking it was Christmas. Of course, I brought Nova Scotian, prominently Cape Breton music, but some Nova Scotian acts. And that went everywhere. And ultimately ended up me doing a 2-hour radio show on the air, which I did not anticipate. So we're talking and playing Cape Breton, Nova Scotian music. And then we did a phone-in segment. And I had the very unique conversations regarding, what's Gordie Sampson like? And, Mary Jane Lamond. And I even sold a Seagull guitar to some musician who had questions because he knew they were made in Canada. But it was a very cool experience. From that, I was on every list at different releases, and then I was walking into the odd bar, and there's Gordie Sampson playing on the CD player. So the impact was like, I had no idea. I was just trying to keep busy, and of course, I did charge a few of these management companies for carrying it, but. It was the impact overall was huge. And then one of the largest folk festivals in that area, the producer called me and took me out to lunch and wanted to talk about these artists, which I did. And they exchanged information. And, I know of some of our Atlantic Canadian people that are playing there today, but I didn't anticipate it was going to take place. It was a massive reach, a massive impact, and it happened on a community radio station on the other side of the world.
Which speaks to I guess the extension of the networking component has to incorporate people like Nigel who are hardcore enthusiasts for music, and that can't be overlooked. Connecting with people who have ins within these associative bodies or will walk into an office and say, "Hey, I've got something for you." And it's equally as important as I know, Bill, you probably inundated with applicants and emerging artists who want to come in and play on the radio. So what do you look for in terms of the criterion? What are you seeking?
Well, first of all, with our station and probably most of the stations within campus community, we look for emerging artists that are local, regional, Canadian. No offense to our American friends, but they take a back seat. They're not number one priority for us. We do play American artists, certainly, but emerging artists, they've got to be local, regional, Canadian, first and foremost. It gets really busy. You get so many songs sent you constantly. And we do have a good system with Earshot Distro, and we also use the DMDS platform. Yangaroo, some people will know it as, and we also use Play MPE. But the nice thing about all those is that we can filter into Canadian and look for the Canadian music first and foremost. But we're certainly looking for something that we think the audience will relate to. It's also, and this is probably key for artists. It's really nice that you've worked, if you've got a full album. EPs seem to be a little better way to go these days. But if you can give us a focus track or a single, it's going to help a lot more, because I know for myself, besides running the radio station, you're doing all this music and it's coming in from everywhere. You don't always have time to listen to a complete album as much as you want to, because you just can't do it. So when an artist can come forward and say, "Hey, this is what I think, could be a focus track or whatever." Or the other side of that would be, and I really encourage a lot of artists to do this when they contact us, is do you want us to listen as best we can to your 4-song EP or whatever, and suggest to you what we think would be a good song to submit to radio, we think has the most potential for radio airplay? Because a lot of times artists will say, "Well, this is my favorite song and I want to get it out there." But the job of radio, for us anyway, when we're talking about emerging artists, is to try to break you into a market and get you as much recognition as possible. And the other side of that too is, once you get 1 or 2 stations that are doing that, we all talk to one another. I couldn't tell you the number of times I'll be talking to someone, and it might even be, radio promotions people that are working other people, and I'm saying, "You should hear this artist. and we talk about it. So we spread that word. But overall, I think more or less, if the artist can give us a focus track or a single, that gives us a lot more chance to really push that. It's a lot easier for us to take that one track and insert it and get it into more rotation than it is to have different hosts try to play one piece of an album somewhere along the way.
Now, with your different hosts and curated content and across different radio stations, would you say it's possible for you to come across an artist that doesn't fit with the kind of show you're looking to curate, but may fit with a different radio station vibe, and not to necessarily get dissuaded from making those connections with multiple radio stations, but also from the artistic perspective to self-inform about what kind of content different radio stations are producing, what kind of shows they're hosting, and maybe to some degree vet their own content to fit within those different segments or across those different stations. Are you sharing on the back end? If I were to submit a song and you didn't feel that it fit any of the programming that you were working on at that time, would you have feedback to give to an artist in that case, or would you maybe necessarily point them in the right direction?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Even with our station, and we certainly have a certain type of format that we try to keep structured to some extent, but there are shows within the week that we broadcast that we can easily take a song that we might say, okay, this is a little heavy for our audience at 10 o'clock in the morning, but we can certainly get that into our East Coast After Dark show on Friday night. You know, that sort of thing. And we can get it, or we can get into a feature situation. But we also, at that same time, when an artist will come to us, and sometimes they come to us even they're planning on a mini tour or whatever, we'll tell them, you need to contact this station because I know they're playing this, and you contact this, you know. And I will say that I think probably, I used to say, you know, we'd suggest maybe the odd independent commercial station might play something, but it's become so regimented at commercial and corporate radio now that I just tell all the independent artists that come to us, this is what you need to do. Contact every campus community radio station you can. You need names, you need call letters, you need addresses, emails. We'll get those for you. And of course, through Earshot Distro, they can reach all those stations real quick and at an affordable rate as well.
Earshot Distro for all artists who may be listening in right now. It's a great place to start.
I think Bill just designed a new workshop for CB Mike. Yeah, that's brilliant, Bill.
Well, and Duane, I'm sorry to swing this back around to you. You're over my shoulder here. Emerging artists from the perspective of symbiosis within the industry, because we're seeing this on the level of campus and community radio. They're representing their audience, number one. They obviously want to connect local content to that audience, and their audience has an expectation of them to vet a certain caliber of music. So when you have emerging artists within the network of CB Mike, and they're coming to you for advice on production, where do we begin? If you have a back pocket full of songs, how do you know as an artist what will resonate with local audiences? And is it important to write to your, the local geography and what listeners want to hear? Or is it more important to be authentic to yourself?
Good question. I would always say, first and foremost, to start at least being authentic to yourself. Yourself is why you started in the first place, and something within yourself inspired you to write your music and to bring it forward. There's lots of opportunity for constructive criticism as you move through your career. And I think in being true to yourself, part of that is being open to that. If you're going to put yourself out there, you need to be aware that that's an element of the industry. and be prepared for that, because there's nothing wrong with that. None of us can all be the best at everything, obviously. So yeah, I would definitely stick to your, to what makes the music you. You can always adapt and try to accommodate an audience, obviously. And maybe even in your early stages, you're trying to do that within yourself, because that's what's coming out of you. So, and in terms of like production, in this particular day and age, there's a little bit of a dial back on some of that. Not to say that you shouldn't pay particular attention or care about what you're doing. Obviously, that's still very important. But in the current, musical landscape, we've seen a lot of changes over the years, and clearly there's a lot of smaller production studios and home studio material that's coming out, that is of a quality that wasn't quite there before. As you know, in one of Bill's earlier points there, he, mentioned, if you could fix this or make the drums sound a little better or whatever, that was certainly a problem in earlier formats of being a home recording or even small studio recording. And still to this day, like I have a lot of artists that obviously can't afford to go into a higher end studio right away. So they'll do a lot of their, pre-production work, or, work where they're trying to get a certain sound. They'll do that in another studio, but that studio may not have the capabilities of doing a proper job of mixing and mastering that product for you. So you may take that as a second piece to another location to have that done, and to have a product that's more suitable for radio play, obviously. And then it puts another set of ears on it before it gets to radio to say, okay, it's good, but we need to replace this part, right? So, but the days of spending 30 grand on your first album are kind of gone by the wayside. People are doing it much cheaper than that now, for sure. And, but the product quality can still be very good. And I think you do need to pay a certain amount of attention to what you're going to put out there. But you don't want to beat yourself to death. And again, the difference between commercial and community and campus radio is you do get a chance to kind of have an opportunity for forgiveness in some of that, because they will help you critique those things. And like an offer to listen to an EP to tell you what might be the best song on that list to hit radio is not something you're going to get from your commercial radio partners. So that's important. But in this day and age, not everybody's recording full albums like they used to. Be ashamed if you're working off of a single or two songs or an EP. Most EPs now are 3 to 6 songs. But a lot of people are releasing music in pieces. So that could be singles over a period of time. And if they garner enough success and traction with those singles, pardon me, they will then release an album of that stuff. And that way it allows you to afford your process a little differently, rather than having to come up with all the money up front. Unless of course you're able to tap into a program that helps for recording assistance, like the current program that we're offering, or a Factor can assist you in recording. But I definitely think, pick a smaller focus and go with that, and do take the opportunity to connect and get a little bit of critique and go with that, right? And the beauty of that is you're not hitting mass markets then, but you're able to get traction. For example, the coastal radio has a great following. and they're going to feed the music to the audience that they know will respond. And that's good for you. And then and as he said before, that it's very helpful in that early stage, getting that music out, that you're probably going to build some shows around that locally at least, and they can help you promote that as well. And that's important because again, getting the music out there, even if you're working off a single or two songs, and you're playing the rest of your music, or you're playing it in a mix of cover music just to have your shows, but you're focusing on driving that. Because this is my single. I just had it played on the Coast radio, and or Caper radio, or at CBU, and you can fit that into your show. But leveraging that opportunity to have that connection and that critique, I think, is very important in the early stages as you move along. So yeah, definitely go with that.
Fantastic. Well, we have 10 minutes left, so we're going to open up to the floor for some questions. I know there's a live stream as well. Just to encapsulate and summarize, be authentic, connect with your local campus and community radio, appreciate your local audience, and be receptive to feedback as you begin your journey as an emerging artist. So I will ask Johnny to hand off the mic where possible. Any hands in the audience here? Don't be shy.
Hi, Cruz Wilson from CFXU up in Antigonish. This question is kind of expanding on what you were saying, Bill, with being a music director. I'm just kind of wondering if you could further explain some of the things artists can do to stand out among other submissions. Like, I know you probably get tons of email submissions, some in-person submissions, and if there's certain methods that are kind of more eye-catching as a music director. Yeah, I'm wondering if you kind of speak on that a little bit. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think basically, I can only speak for us. What I do is I tend to answer every email that I can. I do appreciate if an artist sends, again, the focus track or the single first. And hopefully, the first response I send is, as soon as I get a chance, I'll listen to this and I'll give you honest feedback. One of the things sometimes that I really feel bad about, and I would suggest to artists not to necessarily do, is just suddenly drop in on you in the office, because I've had that happen where they come in and I've got a CD and I want to get it played, and I understand the passion. But there are things we have to look at. And I've had people stand there and say, I want you to play it and I want to listen to it now, and I might be dealing with the fact that our network just went down, and I'm trying to fix that, or somebody is suddenly called in sick and I need to fill that air shift. So that's one of the things I would definitely say don't do to a music director. Don't just show up with your CD. The other side of that is I've had some people show up with CDs that they recorded, and as we said, as Duane alluded to, technology's changed greatly, and home recordings can be very, very good. I've had some folks walk in and demand to get played, and I look at the CD, and it's a whole bunch of songs backed by karaoke tracks recorded in their basement, and there's no clearance on those, and we're not touching that. So, but for the average artist, if you send just a very brief email, some artists now use trackers, and I have to say, I've worked with some of the trackers I've worked with for 30 plus years now. So we have a great relationship, and I typically know the minute that tracker sends me something, it's okay. I've got to listen to it because I know who they work with, what their standards are. But if you're kind enough to send the short email and the song, and if you send the MP3 or the WAV in that email, that's great as well. Sometimes I get things like, I couldn't tell you how many times, and I'm not trying to pick on Spotify, I really am not. Okay, maybe a little. But one of the things that drives me crazy is I've had so many submissions, especially this past year, it seems, where someone sends me something and says, listen to my track on Spotify. Guess what? I don't go to Spotify. We're a radio station. So send me the track, be it MP3 or WAV, and I will definitely listen to it and I will get back to you.
So it's more of a what not to do if you want to be heard.
Maybe
It's good,
so.
it's good points. I've been attending a bunch of sessions with some industry people on pitching music in various regards, so radio or to festivals and various things. So I've had a good opportunity to talk with a lot of people that are at the head of those, and it's interesting the various things that you get to hear. But the sort of the standard thing that I keep hearing is simplicity, professionalism is a must with everything. So make sure that you're spelling everything out correctly, that your message is concise and clear, and again, not to overload with information and contact on your initial contact. If they want to know more, they'll come looking for it. So as Bill said, best off to give a direct link rather than send them on a social media hunt to find your music. You can indicate that it's all available there. And if they would like all your links and stuff, you'll share further information, but keep it simple, keep it to the point, and give them a direct access to whatever content it is you're trying to promote at that time. It's very important.
Any more questions there, Johnny, before we wrap up? Beautiful. Well, we thank you all for coming out today.
Thank
and we thanks to the live stream. I just want to say that I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to be working with all of these fantastic gentlemen in myriad capacities. And I've learned a lot today myself, just listening in on your experience. And we've got a strong internal network on Cape Breton Island. So if you are an emerging artist on Cape Breton Island, I advocate that you join these networks, whether it's CB Mike in Music Nova Scotia, and get yourself out there connecting with people who are passionate about what they're doing, and radio that curates content to local audiences and will appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you, folks.